Subway Story by Julia Sarcone-Roach. To Cecile, who first put Jessie on the tracks, and to Nancy, who brought her home. Subway Story, Julia Sarcone-Roach, Alfred A. Knopf, New York. When Jessie was born in St. Louis, Missouri, she weighed 75,122 pounds and was 51.5 feet long. She had a loud horn, 4 big fans, 4 large windows, bright lights for seeing, sturdy seats for sitting, and a gleaming coat of paint. She was a beautiful, shiny, new subway car. Jessie arrived at her new home in New York City and got to work right away. She was strong and fast. People relied on her to get to their jobs or to school or to see their friends and family. Jessie traveled all over the big, bustling city. When the World's Fair began, Jessie had the special job of carrying visitors to the fairgrounds. Sometimes Jessie helps carry unusual things. She made sure to go slower around the curves, so everyone and everything arrived safe. Sometimes musicians practiced on board, and Jessie was happy to provide some rumbles and clickety-clacks for their songs. Even the occasional pigeon came along for a ride. No matter who or what was on board, Jessie's favorite part of her route was the curve of the track right before her tunnel ducked under the river. She would speed up for the curve and then zip down with a screech of sparks shooting off her wheels. And even deep down under the river, Jessie could hear the echoing boom of the tugboats far up above her. If she passed another train, she'd always give them a friendly wink with a twinkle of her headlights. Over the years, Jessie saw the city change, and she had some changes of her own. Her parts got fixed when they broke down, and she even got to change colors. She got a new light in 1969, new paint in 1971, a new door in 1978, a new window, and lots of new paint in 1986. But when Jessie got older, a new coat of paint couldn't hide the cracks in her seats and the scratches and scuffs on her windows and floors. Still, she kept working as best she could through springs and summers, falls and winters. Another spring came, and Jessie noticed more new, shiny silver trains running on the tracks. By summer, Jessie's fans were just not strong enough to keep her passengers cool, so newer, air-conditioned trains took over her route during the summer months. Jessie missed the people and the activity. She was always glad when fall came and she could go back to work. Then one year, the air turned frosty and the leaves changed color, but nobody came to put Jessie back on her route. She sat in a yard with the other older trains. She thought about the people she had carried Did they notice that she was gone? One day, workers came and moved Jessie inside. When they began removing her fans, Jessie was excited. Finally, I'm getting fixed, she thought. As they pulled out her seats and windows, Jessie began to feel much lighter. But then she felt someone unbolting her doors. Wait, she thought. My doors aren't broken. I need them. Instead of fixing her, the people were taking Jessie apart. Off came her lights, her signs, her brakes, and her horn, too. Then they washed Jessie over and over again and left her with a group of other cleaned-up subway cars. The cars were loaded onto a barge in the river, and a tugboat pulled the barge out of the city harbor. As the waves got bigger, Jessie felt the breezes whistle through her empty windows. Curious fish peered up at them as the barge moved into the open ocean. Will I ever get to see my city again? Jessie nervously thought. After traveling for hours, the barge came to a stop. The subway cars could see nothing but water. Everything was quiet. Suddenly, the crane in the middle of the barge began to move. It shoved the car next to Jessie to the edge of the barge. Splash! The car went over and disappeared beneath the waves. Is that what will happen to me? Jessie wondered. And then she felt the crane beneath her, pushing her toward the edge. Then, whoosh! Jessie plunged into the salty ocean. Water thundered into every part of Jessie, and it got darker and darker as she sank down, 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 until... Thump! She hit the ocean floor. A huge cloud of sand and silt churned up around her, and at first Jessie couldn't see anything. Then, out of the dimness, came a little silver fish. In and out of Jessie's windows and doors he swam. Soon, there were more curious little fish swirling around her. In the darkness, Jessie felt a little like she was back in the subway tunnels she knew so well. Over the next few days, more fish decided to move in and live with Jessie. In the following weeks, shellfish settled inside, and plants began to grow all over her. Then bigger fish from the deeper parts of the ocean came to feed on the smaller fish. Sometimes a dolphin or a turtle would stop by to visit. Now Jessie lives on the ocean floor. Tiny creatures called coral cling to the same poles that people held onto when Jessie lived and worked above ground. Hundreds of fish dart through the doors that people once used. Jessie was once an important part of the city where she lived. And now a whole city lives inside her. Author's note. Jessie's story is inspired by a real subway car that arrived in New York for the 1964 World's Fair and was reefed off the coast of Delaware in 2001. The car was a model R33WF, which was one of the fleet of subway cars designed to impress and welcome visitors from around the world and to showcase the New York subway system. The first car of the model was even featured in TV ads and on a float in a parade. After the World's Fair ended, the R33WFs continued to work their routes. They began their lives on the tracks painted aquamarine and cream. Later on, like many other models of subway cars, The cars received the distinctive red paint job that gave them the nickname Redbirds. Throughout the world, people have found different ways to reuse older subway cars. In London, cars from the underground have been made into artist studios and workspaces. In China, subway cars have been converted into shelters for people who were left homeless by earthquakes. Museums, schools, and even restaurants have preserved or reused retired subway cars. Some countries are selling old cars to other railroad systems. After they were taken out of service, many of the Redbirds were reused as artificial reefs in the Atlantic. A reef is an underwater chain of rock or a sandbar, and just as a house is built upon a foundation, a reef is a base where undersea creatures can attach and build homes. People have been creating artificial reefs all over the world for thousands of years. Shipwrecks may have been some of the first accidental artificial reefs. Modern reef builders have also experimented with reused materials: concrete pipes, steel highway bridges, even planes, automobiles, trucks, tugboats, and subway cars. After a subway car is sunk to the ocean floor, barnacles, blue mussels, oysters, soft corals, and sponges quickly begin to grow. Then sea bass, triggerfish, and flounder arrive. The flounder like to lie in the sand on the roof of the car, while the other fish live inside. Soon bigger fish from deeper in the ocean, like tuna and mackerel, come to eat the tiny fish that dart out of the waving seagrasses carpeting the floor of the car. Though they are not as great or as long-lasting as natural reefs, the subway cars will provide homes to generations of underwater creatures and new fishing grounds for both people and fish. Julia Sarcone-Roach got the idea for Subway Story after a visit to the New York Transit Museum in Brooklyn. She was amazed to learn that old subway cars were having second lives as artificial reefs. That was recycling on a scale she'd never imagined, and soon after, Subway Story was born. Julia attended the Rhode Island School of Design and recently made her Knopf picture book debut with the charmingly illustrated and ever so slightly naughty The Secret Plan. Like her rail-riding heroine Jessie, Julia is an avid traveler and has many adventures in mind for future picture books. She lives in Brooklyn, New York, where she regularly rides the subway. The back of the book says, "A brave subway car finds adventure off the tracks."